To the game at the Golden Nugget for $500. Blinds are 1-2, and in this first interesting hand, the under the gun player raises to 6, and the cutoff, who was a pretty tight player, 3 bets to $16. I flatten the big blind, and the original raiser calls. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes 3 deuce 4 rainbow, pretty safe for us. Action checks through, and the turn brings the 9 of spades. This time I decide to bet. I could very well be ahead, but I do want to protect my hand, and I'd be happy to take it down right here. So I made it $30, and the cutoff, who was the original 3-better, makes the call. River is the 5 of diamonds, and now any ace makes a straight, and I'm hoping to get to showdown, and if my opponent's calling on the turn with air, then maybe he'll take a stab. So I just decide to check, and my opponent very quickly checks back and turns over pocket aces. So very strange hand, and not really sure why he didn't bet the river or the flop. But in this next hand, I get dealt pocket queens in the big blind. The under the gun +1 player raises to 7, and the hijack makes a call. The cutoff decides to 3-bet, and he makes it 52, which is a pretty large sizing. Usually this means a very, very strong hand, so when it folds to me in the big blind, this is a very clear flat, which is why I decide to 4-bet. Yeah, I'm not going to waste time trying to explain why I 4-bet, because I don't really know. The other players fold, and my opponent started the hand with $152, so he shoves it in there. I call the extra $2. Flop comes Jack 10-9, so we actually flop an open ender. Turn brings a Jack, and the river brings a 9. My opponent ended up having aces, so we lose this one. In the next hand, the under the gun player limps. I raise ace-7 of hearts in under the gun +1 to $12 and get 4 calls, so we're going 5 ways to a flop, which comes 7 Jack 5 with 2 hearts. So pretty good flop for us. We have middle pair and the nut flush draw. The under the gun player checks, and I think this is a pretty interesting spot because I don't think check calling is a bad idea, and I also don't think betting is a bad idea. In this situation, I just decided to check. In hindsight though, I prefer betting, because if I check here, then it's very easy for my opponents to eliminate hands like overpairs and ace-jack from my range, because I'm pretty much always betting those hands on this flop, especially with 5 players in the hand. So I think betting allows me to represent stronger hands on later streets. When I posted this hand, I got mixed opinions from different people, so not really sure what the best option is, but I personally prefer a bet. As played though, I ended up checking, and action checked all the way through. Turn is the queen of spades. The under the gun player checks. This time I decided to bet $30, which I'm not really sure what I was thinking, because the only value hand I could be playing this way is like ace queen, because as mentioned earlier, we probably don't have overpairs in our range, and I'm probably betting any value hands I could have now on the flop anyways. So I guess I was just trying to take a stab at it because everyone checked. I think this was pretty badly played, and the cutoff ends up making the call. River is an offsuit king. I decided to keep betting here because I think this card's better for my range, but not really sure if I'm getting my opponent to fold a queen. Yeah, I bet again, and I made it 75, and my opponent very quickly calls. I tell him he's good, and he ends up having queen jack. So played a little bit too aggressively in this hand. In this next hand, the under the gun +1 player opens to $12. I 3-bet ace king offsuit in the small blind to 33, and the original raiser calls. So heads up to a flop, which comes king 10-5 rainbow. My opponent only had $80 left, so I decided to check here because I think any hand that I'd be getting value from would probably just bet anyways, and I think that any hands that completely missed are just gonna fold. So I decided that checking here is the best option. I think by not c-betting here, I might get more value from 8s, 9s, jacks, 10x than I would if I just bet here. So I checked, and my opponent says since he only has 80 left, he's gonna go all in. I snap call, the board runs out, and my opponent turns over pocket 10s.
Oh, nice hand.
Set of 10.
In this next hand, I have ace king once again. I open to $12 and get 2 callers. Flop comes 6 ace 10 2 clubs. Big blind checks, and I bet $22 and only the cutoff calls. Turn brings the 6 of hearts. My opponent has $56 left, so I put him all in. He calls right away. The river's the queen of clubs, and we both showed our hands at the same time. and he ended up having ace king of clubs. So he flatted my raise, and we both flop top pair, but he ended up hitting a flush on the river, and we ended up losing this one. In this last hand, the under the gun +1 player limps. I raised pocket 8s to $12 in the hijack, and the big blind and the limper call. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes deuce 7-6 to diamonds. Pretty safe flop for my hand. Action checks to me, and I bet $25. The under the gun +1 player calls, so heads up to a turn card, which is the deuce of hearts. And this time my opponent leads for $50, and I'm not really sure what he's representing here. Just seems a little strange to me, but I'm definitely not folding on this blank turn card, so I made the call. The river's the 10 of hearts, and this time my opponent shoves for what ends up being $113.
All in. How much is it?
Again, I don't really know what kind of hands he's representing here. I guess he could have played like 9s this way or something. Not really sure, but I think I thought about it for longer than I should have. But I went to the tank for a while and eventually announced a call.
Call. You got 4s and deuces. 8s and deuces.
After I call, my opponent turns over pocket 4s. So he just decided to make a move, and we end up winning this one.
And that was a good call, man.
Thank you.
Oh, that was a hell of a call.
Thank you, dealer.
Yeah, that's yours right there.
Hell
That's
of
where
a
Joel.
call.
That's where Joel put.
All that shit on there.
What kind of call is
That's
that?
where Joel put.
Hell of a call.
Hell of a call?
Hell of a call.
That was the only open seat.
God
Thank you,
damn.
Thank you.
We were taking so long. I was like, he don't have trips.
We're stuck a bunch, guys, but
Man, that shit is
against
crazy.
a particular person.
Hell
Thank you, sir. I was asking my friend about it, and he said it's a pretty standard call on the river. So I think I might have thought about it a little longer than I should have, but I didn't want to be wrong. And also, if you were following my post from when I was actually in Vegas, you know who this player was. So that's kind of an important detail as well, as to why I took a little longer to make the call. But yeah, anyways, it ended up working out and ended up playing for 8 hours and 15 minutes. So pretty long session compared to other ones I played, and ended up booking a loss of $493. Pretty bad session. We lost about $500. Tomorrow's our last day in Vegas, so hopefully that goes well. I'm gonna grab dinner now and head back to the Airbnb. Have a nice day.